Hello, everyone. I am Victor Sechnoi, the historical consultant for the project. Today, we can say there has been a change of power, a coup. Usually, we are guests of Daniel and give the interview. But today, Daniel Tuseif, the project producer and lead game designer, will tell us about the new features in the missions. Since he primarily developed the ideas and technical tasks for these features, he will be presenting a report today.
Well, I'll try. Hello, everyone.
So Daniel, we have a historical mission on a 500-kilometer sized map. We take off and fly. And what does the player encounter in this type of case?
The pressing issues here are pretty obvious. There's even a word for it, dialectics.
Wow.
Yes, dialectical problem occurs. On one hand, realistic scenario, and we have a realistic flight simulator that implies a combat mission lasting sometimes 2 hours, even 3 hours, because you can fly 300 kilometers one way, patrol something for half an hour, and then fly back another 300 kilometers.
All the combat routine.
Yes. In an entirely realistic scenario, in 9 out of 10 cases, you won't encounter anything there, right? Yes, however, such realism doesn't align at all with the concept of engaging gameplay. How so? The first time it's fun, for sure, there's no doubt.
You're right, but in this case, there are different types of players who come home from work and have a couple of hours to fly. Yes, you can understand that, and some people are on vacation, have a whole day free, and they take off. From takeoff to the target, it's a 2-hour flight, and back, it's a 2-hour flight. There are such people, so in our case, we strive to cater to both audiences. Yes, because we have both a simulator and primarily a computer game.
Exactly. In Great Battles and actually in Race of Flight, I think, before that too, there was such a solution as the ability to start a mission in the air.
Yes, there's different types of start.
Yes, so you could start the mission at your airfield and then fly the entire mission. All those 1 hour maybe, 1.5 to 2 hours. And you return and land, or started in the air right at the target. There was some aerial battle or ground target attack, and after that you didn't have to fly back to your airfield, just reach the front line, I think, and finish. However, the mission contains 3 key points that are particularly interesting, not just one. Not only that only is an attack or an escorting task, like escorting a bomber when the enemy attacks them, interesting. Well, everything in that spirit. Not only is this moment in the mission interesting, in a flight simulator, the moment of takeoff and the moment of landing are always extremely interesting.
Formation of the group there.
Yes, all of that. So we lined up on the runway, there's radio communication happening, we added throttle, we're accelerating, everything's rattling, roaring, we lift off, retract the landing gear, retract the flaps. Radio reports accompany all this push. So in general, it's cool. You see landing even more so, because landing is always a tense element, especially if you have combat damage, and it's always exciting. Will I be able to land it this time? Or maybe it's better to belly land instead of using the landing gear if one has fallen off. Well, it's definitely interesting. So, and in the approach with the start in the air, we cut this off, and turning, well, removing probably half of the thrill that could begin from the mission, all this to shorten its duration. Looking at the examples of senior colleagues from science fiction, we like the word and concept of teleport.
Hyperdrive.
Hyperdrive, yes. And when planning developing game design in Korea in 2022, we decided to try to implement such a technology in the game that would allow in one mission to have both takeoff, target attack, and landing, but at the same time, optionally allow the player to skip the flight to the target and the flight from the target. At the same time, well, it would seem, yes, you could say, well, just make 3 missions.
Yes, activate or deactivate something through a trigger.
Make the 3 separate missions. Here is the takeoff mission, here is the attack mission, here is the landing mission. But it doesn't work like that because even when you take off, specific changes in the state of the plane occur. Something might be dropped along the way, like a tank, maybe something was hit with the wing, something got slightly damaged. This should be preserved.
Maybe someone intercepted and shot at you while you were taking off, right?
Exactly, right? Yes, then there's also the story that, and in the other direction, right? We have we've engaged in combat in an aerial battle. We have a hole in the wing, yes, and here the aileron is shot off. And when I approach the airfield, the hole should remain. Fuel should preferably have leaked out from the tank in that wing, and the aileron should still be missing. It shouldn't have grown back. All right, and in the concept of loading 3 consecutive missions, this is impossible. However, in the idea of the teleporter we developed, it has become possible.
It will accordingly calculate fuel consumption while you have jumped to the point.
Everything is implemented, everything, merely through 2 new mission control elements, these so-called triggers. The first trigger is the relocation trigger, which moves objects from one place to another. If this group of objects, he represents them there while maintaining formation, let's say, right? And the second object, the second mission control element we added is the so-called time shift, which shifts time in the mission. In all objects that are critically important for the mission, well, object classes. Yes, for example, an aircraft, a ship, yes. In these objects, how to say, the extrapolation of its state, it is implemented. So, for example, if it is flying now, it has a hole and fuel is leaking. Therefore, if time is shifted by an hour, its fuel has leaked out, and it essentially did not reach there, it will not appear there. If it were burning, it would definitely burn out in an hour. Therefore, it also won't appear there. However, if everything was okay with it and we skipped an hour, then we need to deduct the fuel it consumed during that hour. And this is actually implemented.
Again, these are all elements of the mission. We also had the idea to create such points that was, well, like when the player tries to jump, for example, right? Accordingly, in the career mechanism, we should make such a setting so that on the way to the target, the player encounters some random events, right?
Right. This is, again, very similar to a standard scenario from Star Wars. Yes. When we are flying through hyperspace, and on the way we encounter a star something. They call them interdictors. Yes, it's a triangular thing with big spheres that pulled ships out of hyperspace, and you were forced in the mission scenario to interrupt your hyper jump and fight along the way, and then continue if you won. It's a similar story here. You make your time jump, but let's say the scenario includes a probability that someone will attack you on the way. This means that the jump will be interrupted if fate has it that way. You'll fight there, your status will update again, and some holes might appear. Maybe some of your wingmen will be killed, right? Right, and well, if the mission hasn't ended, you are still able to fight. Accordingly, you then make the next jump to the target, and in this way, well, and the same in reverse. In this way, the mission using this type of approach becomes a chain of exciting events. But that is one thing after another. First, we take off, gather the group, and this is interesting. Someone attacked us on the way.
Cool. So we took off to bomb some port, something like that.
Awesome. We fly back. Also, we don't wait there for 2 hours. We reach the airfield. Landing happens almost immediately after we leave the target. Yes, we skipped the entire 2-hour flight back. That's also awesome. So it turns out that your mission is 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, packed or even overpacked with events, and it becomes exciting.
Yes, it should be noted again that this will be optional. So if you want to fly 3 hours one way and 3 hours the other way, you can accept or decline through a dialogue interface.
Yes, it's not just optional, it's also interactive, meaning it's integrated directly into the mission process. Yes, you've taken off and they ask you. So it's not an option you set before the mission, but right after takeoff, they ask, do we skip the flight stage to the target or not? And if you press, no, I want to fly, you fly. If you press, I want to skip, time is short, you skip. And because of this, yes, it turns out that everything adjusts to your mood, how you want it right now. For example, you want to skip there, but on the way back, when you've made holes for you, fly yourself. Yes, and you want to make it to the airfield yourself. It's an hour's flight, so go ahead.
On a wing and a prayer, as they say.
Again, it is essential to note that all these tools, these new triggers that will be added, will be available to all players in the mission editor. So if you are planning to create a campaign with long flights, you can use all of these without any problems, no?
No, there is nothing complicated from the point of view of the user. Who creates this mission? Literally, as I said, two triggers that solve all these tasks.
Another one of the triggers is like this time lapse, you could say a kind of side effect, right? That you can make a beautiful time lapse, right? So you start the mission, set this trigger, it triggers some event, and you have beautiful clouds, the sun moving across the sky and all that. All this can be done. Consequently, we are now flying with our large group, and the next problem we encounter is the new feature we added, which will help us solve this issue. We have a large group of planes, and in terms of the scenario, we have, for example, 30 bombers, 4 engine ones, which are covered by 30 or 60 fighters. In our old engine, it slowed down significantly due to the heavy load on the physics. And what interesting thing did we come up with here?
Well, how to say or describe it? It's not that we invented or came up with this idea. Or if we mention our predecessors, yes, and in the 1946 model, there was a somewhat simplified approach to AI.
Well, the flight model itself was much simpler because...
Well, for AI, even simpler, yes. And in lock-on, it was not yet DCS, it was still lock-on. There was a so-called simplified flight model for an aircraft with artificial intelligence. It was a very simple implementation of flight physics, which they call the rail dynamics. However, it's not entirely rail-based, actually. In some places, yes. In others, no. And due to its simplicity, it required very few computational resources, allowing for a lot of such planes to be launched in a mission. This, of course, led to certain behavioral artifacts. Well, the old-timers all remembered that if the same fighters took off ahead of you, catching up with them was a problem.
Also, when bombers approached the airfield, if the target envelope was below, they dove nearly vertically.
And leveled out, and yes, and it was fine, and everyone pretended nothing unusual happened. Right, also, or in lock-on, many can also remember what flying information with wingmen looked like when, unless you made some really sharp maneuvers, they held a formation of 4 planes. No matter what you did, there they all were glued to you.
They were tied to you.
That's how you hover, and they hover too. Well, I mean, it's not realistic, but there were many of them. You can't really criticize it because it's a standard game development approach. That is pros and cons, as they say. The idea was to find a compromise. The compromise is that we indeed developed a simplified flight model technology within the framework of Korea. At the moment, for 4-engine bombers for the B-29. And we already had, I think, a dev blog on this topic about such planes. There can really be a lot of such planes in a mission. There's even a short clip where MiG-15 starts an attack, and we have a giant formation of these bombers. And in the case where there are many of these planes in the mission, well, like there are 30 flying, right? The fact that they have a simplified model won't be very noticeable. Especially since the physics are still there. It's not entirely an on-rails model. There's still aerodynamics, force balance calculations, and the movement of the aircraft is still the result of force balance calculations. That is the forces of lift, drag, thrust, and gravity, 4 of them. Standard. And it will not behave unnaturally, so to speak. Yes, if you shoot off a wing, then even in this case, yes, indeed, it will lose lift on that side, and it will start to spin.
Again, so on complex airplanes, there were complex systems, and on the simplified airplane, all of this is greatly optimized.
Yes, they are not there. Roughly speaking, there is definitely no electrical system there. There is definitely no hydraulic system in place. There is not even a landing gear, because...
For now, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Might suddenly appear.
Let's see. And on the other hand, a large formation of bombers also involves a multitude of very complex 3D models. This also affects the graphics.
Animations too.
Yes. By removing the landing gear, well, probably the landing gear, what else is there? Parts of the internal space, all of that. By simplifying the visual damage model a bit, we can literally reduce the number of polygons by 2 times, and the number of textures the airplane uses by 1.5 times. Yes, and especially since for the B-29 is not that important, since they didn't take off from Korea at all. They took off from Japan.
From Japan, from Okinawa, yes, far away.
Although we plan to add the additional simplified planes with simplified flight models in the future, we will also include other aircraft, well, at least 4 of them, right? Single-engine strike aircraft. Of those we currently have, some were most commonly used in large numbers, so we will create simplified flight models for them and see how they behave with such physics in the role of strike aircraft in a mission.
In a dogfight.
Yes, and well, not quite in maneuvering combat. That is, they are intended to be used, for example, to escort the same mass formations of bombers. So when you have 30 B-29s flying, or say 40, yes, and 20 Sabres covering them, these 20 Sabres will not be performing wonders in turns. Their maneuvers will consist of diving away, gain speed, move to the side, gain altitude with a combat turn, and attack you again from a dive. And so if you look at footage or gun camera recordings from the Korean War, in most cases, it's not some mega maneuverable fight.
Well, it's also difficult to do all that at high altitude.
Especially at high altitude. Again, yes, exactly. And possibly in this case, a simplified flight model will be reasonably sufficient. But this does not mean that we are abandoning the idea of a full-fledged, complete flight model for an aircraft with artificial intelligence. I emphasize that this only concerns missions where there are a large number of aircraft. In fact, there are many combat situations where 5 on 5, 10 on 10 clash in the sky, right? Most of them, the absolute majority, overwhelmingly, yes, like a flight or squadron sorted, and another squadron intercepted it. And that's the situation. This is the most common scenario in both the Korean War and World War II. And there all the planes will have complete physics.
Yes, but here we will note that it's not like that this aircraft has a simplified flight model now. We will have the B-29 both in its complex form and in addition a simplified version, which is the same aircraft with a simplified flight model. And probably this will very seriously affect, roughly speaking, the interaction specifically in combat with the aircraft. The fact that it has many turrets, many entities that control these turrets, and artificial intelligence.
Yes, exactly. Another aspect, let's say, of the aircraft that affected performance, especially in the case of multi-engine aircraft. It is, oddly enough, not for modeled engines. Why in missions, great battles, as they say? Bombers are sluggish. Yes, because a bomber has 3, 4, or 5 gun positions. Each gun position in a complex aircraft is a separate object attached to the plane. It has its own AI gunner, which in the case of player-controlled aircraft allows the player actually to man it and fire. The turret has a complex articulated targeting system, right? A full-fledged machine gun is there with all the overheating, jamming, and...
All present.
Yes, all of that. Accordingly, we installed turrets from ground vehicles on simplified planes. Which naturally are considered simplified. They don't have any overheating. They basically fire in short bursts, so they don't overheat. That's fine. It just won't fire in long bursts, so there's no need to model overheating. Okay, well, the bullets are real, meaning there's no difference. Whether it's from that turret or this one, they will shoot at you with the same bullets, and the effect of a hit will be the same. And the main thing is that this is a single object. It controls all the firing points of the aircraft, the so-called multi-turret. That is, there is only one object with one artificial intelligence which calculates all the aiming corrections once and selects a target. First of all, the target still needs to be found, which also takes resources. It searches for the target, aims the turret at it, and all the others are aligned to it according to the geometry. Well, with the data,
This can even be considered a feature, as the B-29 already had a central firing position. One gunner could take control of several turrets
exactly.
of this kind.
Exactly. Even on the full complex B-29, the turrets are combined, I believe, upper, lower, front, rear, and upper, lower, middle.
Right, depending on which station to control them from. So we talked about that, but how will we show all these beautiful things? Why we have done some serious work on the cameras, particularly with these external views.
Yes, we probably need some backstory here. Cool story. So it's either 2011 or 2012. I think the beginning of 2012. And back then we were working as a small team, refining Rise of Flight. An idea came to mind to attempt to create a prototype of some kind of arcade airplane. A little flying game, yes, it was extremely arcade-like. I mean, really, to do a loop, you had to press a button to do a loop, and it would do a loop. and with rolls as well, and with everything. It flew only to the right, not to the left, a little up, a little down. But at the same time, yes, of course, it flew completely on rails, meaning it just did the loop in a circle. Yes, but at the same time, there was a camera implemented that looked at the plane. It was not static, but was attached by certain physical links to the plane. It depended on whether the plane tilted. It also tilted with a delay. Yes, if the plane started going up, the camera followed with a delay, and it looked like the plane was sort of, yes, leaving the frame, and it led to a completely astonishing effect. People who...
From outside the team, right?
Yeah.
There's some kind of flight model here.
Yes, it seems that people who understand flight models know what it is. They've tried it on a joystick or a gamepad.
Gamepad.
So they tried it and said, oh, you have physics here, but there's no physics. Everything flies on rails. It's just that the camera is designed to create the illusion of physicality. And then we concluded that the camera is important.
Well, of course, sometimes the packaging is not important, and more precisely, the content is. However, in this case, the packaging very seriously enhances and showcases all the product's advantages.
Yes, exactly. And if there wasn't much merit in terms of physics, nevertheless, the lack of a well-made camera also works the other way around. You can recall the story about the so-called dolphins.
We had a situation where many thought that the flight model was off. Well, that's when the plane dives. The problem is that the camera is attached to the center of mass of the aircraft, and because there was no camera inertia, it seemed like the plane was jerking. Well, we had an example. I think even Petrovich recorded that track.
In Russian, this problem was called dolphins. In English, I think it was waving, right?
Darn, listen, yes. I think there might be something about dolphining. So the point was we recorded the same track. That is, in one video from this track, we recorded a video when the plane jerked accordingly with F2 with the camera.
External camera rigidly attached.
External camera. And the second, accordingly, the view from the camera was on the airfield. The plane jerked at a low altitude, flew past this camera, and the effect was completely different. In this case, it's similar to the flaw in the external camera mode, which in general played a cruel joke on us. Therefore, this is the kind of effect it all has. And accordingly, you can...
Zotka, so it can be added? No, at one time our camera was not attached to the center of mass. At one time in Rise of Flight, our camera was just attached to the center of the airplane model. And everyone said that the airplane behaved unrealistically because the camera was like this and, excuse me, here's the plane. Its center of mass is here. Yes, first of all.
It seemed that on this very...
And the center, yes, and the center of the model is right here. And people had the feeling that the plane was rotating around this point somewhere in the middle, closer to the tail, which doesn't correspond to physics at all, of course. Its main movement naturally occurs around the center of mass like this. It is simply because the camera was attached to this point, and when the ground is far away, you don't recognize it. Or, for example, the situation where a wing fell off and your center of mass shifted to this side, right?
It rotates like this?
Yes. And if the camera was looking, it continued to look at the original center of mass, which was here, right? And it just rotated evenly in the frame. People said, well, this is unrealistic behavior. It should actually be spiraling. We adjusted the camera to the dynamic center of mass, the wing fell off, it shifted here, and now it looks here. And this created the spiral movement.
Here is a live picture.
And now the next step was taken here. The next step was that we remembered our experience with the arcade.
What
Yes, in Korea, we have implemented the dynamic physical behavior of the video frame relative to the airplane for all available cameras in the game. So the frame has stopped being rigid. If, for example, you take the external f2 camera, your airplane moves in the frame. Previously, it followed it rigidly. Well, more precisely like this. Now, if the plane goes up, it will do so with a delay. If it goes to the left, it will also follow with a delay and tilt a little, right? And you get frames that, firstly, are very similar to real video footage.
Filming in the air?
When the cameraman, a real cameraman, films the plane, they track it in a certain way, and there is an aiming error of the camera. And we reproduce exactly this error. That's the first point. Secondly, this behavior emphasizes the physics of the maneuver the plane performs, and this is done for all cameras. This is done for the external camera on the plan, for the flyby camera, for the padlock cameras, and for what other cameras do you have? It's done for them too, basically.
I also heard that we've added another interesting feature for those who especially love realism, the ability to watch the replay, right?
Oh, so by the way, Asim, incidentally, we have already shown it. If you didn't notice it, we will tell you about it now. Recently, in the dev brief episode, I don't remember which one, you could see like a camera from a photo gun, yes, or a gun camera with everyone will think it's a filter applied to the video, but actually it's directly from the game recordings without post-processing.
Yeah.
So the game will feature a fully functional gun camera, not only in terms of its location, but also in terms of how the footage looks. This means that factors such as monochrome, interference patterns, scratched film, and lens characteristics, including the flares they produced, will all be considered. FPS is frames per second. It will also be reduced because on gun cameras the frame rate was reduced.
Well, there are different ones.
Yes, and this is precisely the story of the dev brief, where we talked about searching for references. Yes, here he was.
16, 32, and 64 are possible.
Yes, something about the second one.
Uh-huh.
Yes, Joe, so it will actually be directly integrated into the game, and you won't need any video editor to see the footage from the camera gun.
Again, it's important to note that this will be an optional feature. So if you don't like all sorts of effects, you can get yourself a nice, colorful film.
Yes, please.
So we do have cameras, and it would be nice to record all this as a memory. We have worked on the tracks more on the feature as well.
Yes, well, we've already done something, and we plan to do more before the release. But experiments are still needed because there are some difficulties I'll talk about now. And what's the idea? Very often, we were asked to ensure that the track recording doesn't stop if the flight recording file reaches its maximum size, which was 500 megabytes, I believe.
Yes, 500.
And well, if we're flying a 10th mission in multiplayer or in career mode, it's usually about 15 minutes. So the problem is that it's not that simple to do. First, you can't make the file bigger because if the file is too large, it becomes problematic to write to it. Second, the disk space might run out. Thirdly, there's this problem. I flew for 2 hours and I ended up with a sequence of several files. If I record them one after another, yes, how do I watch them normally and conveniently? I have to load them one by one. So let's say I realize that the event wasn't in this part, but in the previous one. I have to exit from there and go into this one, right? So we will develop a design and try to solve this set of problems in the following way. There will be an option allowing the player to record tracks, recording flights right as they fly continuously. And at the end of the mission, they will be asked, do you want to save the sequence of files that was recorded during this mission? If he says, yes, then the sequence is saved. If he says, no, nothing was interesting, the sequence is deleted. This is, of course, optional because the problem with limited disk space is still there. Not everyone has terabytes to collect these tracks. And the second question is actually playback. We plan to refine the playback dialogue of the tracks in such a way that it is like a video recorder where there are several fragments. And he plays them one after another. Within one fragment, you can easily rewind the recording back and forth, skipping to the previous or next one with some delay as it loads. However, you don't need to exit the menu to load another fragment. Whether this will be done or not, we'll see, because this thing is risky. I explained why. However, another thing will definitely be in. It is already done and working. When you are flying a mission, whether it's a career mission or in multiplayer, you look around in your cockpit to see what's happening around you. Actually, in general, a lot of interesting things happen in the game world. So some other plane there, 10 kilometers away from you, shoots down a bomber. Somewhere a tank fires at a vehicle. Somewhere a plane crashes, let's say during landing. And when you played the missions, yes, you weren't really aware of what was happening there. We only extracted the tech chat messages.
Might not have noticed, yes.
Yes, and there's really a lot, like really a lot. And a special mechanism was developed. Sort of a quasi-artificial intelligence. Not quite artificial intelligence. It's a matter of terminology, what to call artificial intelligence. I really enjoy watching videos where these gray-haired guys argue about what artificial intelligence is and what it isn't. But basic artificial intelligence in the sense of an automatic algorithm that determines where and what interesting events happened in the flight recording.
Moreover, this is determined in advance. There is a separate log of these events, and because of this, during playback, we already know that a plane crashed here, not mine, another one.
Yes, and it will automatically position the camera in a way that shows it well.
In short, the Show Me Beautiful button shows everything that...
Yes.
Everything you have.
Yes, if somewhere someone was shooting at someone, that for example, one plane attacks another, and you are flying somewhere off to the side, and this is happening 3 kilometers away from you, and then it started shooting, the camera will automatically focus 2 or 3 seconds in advance of the shot on the target and show how it was.
Our cameras themselves will switch somewhat beautifully there
Yes.
in Eclipse Tower.
Right, so coupled with the previous feature, the cameras have all become dynamic, right? So watching a track, a track of some complex mission kind of turns into, not exactly a movie, but much more interesting than it was before, where you had to switch through object cameras yourself and search for what might have been happening in the track, or maybe not.
Roughly speaking, a finished video, right?
Yes, the track turns into watching, to a certain extent, a combat video.
Right. Well, it seems like we've discussed all the questions. So thank you, Daniel, for talking with us today.
Welcome.
All right, and in closing here, actually, we have pages on all major social networks, including Facebook, X, Reddit, and Discord. Please like, subscribe, and goodbye, everyone.